In 1495, a warship sank off the coast of Sweden carrying King Hans of Denmark and Norway's most advanced naval weapons. For 525 years, the wreck of the Gribshunden, which translates to Griffinhound, sat undisturbed on the seafloor. Then, in 2019, underwater archaeologists made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about medieval naval warfare. They found early firearms specifically designed for ship-to-ship combat, weapons that shouldn't have existed in 1495. These weren't primitive cannons. We're looking at breech-loading swivel guns, sophisticated gunpowder weapons, and close-range combat systems that historians believed was impossible. The Gribshunden represents a technological revolution that happened 500 years ago, and we're only now understanding how advanced medieval naval engineering actually was. Let's start with what the Gribshunden actually was. This wasn't just any ship. The Gribshunden was King Hans of Denmark and Norway's personal flagship, the most powerful warship in Scandinavia. Built around 1490, it measured approximately 115 feet long with a beam of 26 feet. That's massive for the era, comparable to Columbus's Santa Maria, which was only 62 feet long. In May 1495, King Hans was sailing to meet with Swedish officials to negotiate a political union. The Gribshunden was leading a fleet, serving as both a diplomatic statement and a military deterrent. But on the night of May 31st, fire broke out on board. Despite desperate efforts to save the ship, it sank near Ronneby, Sweden. King Hans survived. He'd evacuated to another vessel. But the Gribshunden went down with everything aboard: weapons, provisions, diplomatic gifts, and the king's personal possessions. Here's what makes this wreck archaeologically priceless. It sank quickly and settled in cold, brackish water with low oxygen levels. Those conditions created perfect preservation. Brendan Foley, an archaeologist at Lund University leading the excavation, called it the best preserved late medieval ship in the world. The wreck was actually discovered by sport divers in the 1960s, but serious archaeological investigation didn't begin until 2000. Then, in 2019, researchers made the weapons discovery that would rewrite our understanding of medieval naval warfare. When archaeologists excavated the Gribshunden's weapon systems, they found something historians didn't think existed in 1495: early firearms specifically designed for close-range naval combat. The team recovered breech-loading swivel guns, small cannons mounted on posts that could rotate 360 degrees. These weren't the massive cannons we associate with later warships. These were anti-personnel weapons designed to sweep enemy decks with shot during boarding actions. Here's why that's revolutionary. In 1495, most historians believed naval warfare still relied primarily on ramming, grappling, and hand-to-hand combat. Gunpowder weapons were thought to be rare, expensive, and unreliable. The Gribshunden proved that assumption wrong. Foley explained the significance. These small breech-loading guns were cutting-edge military technology in 1495. They show that naval powers were already integrating firearms into standard naval combat tactics. The excavation also recovered stone and iron cannonballs in various sizes, evidence of a mixed-caliber armament system. Larger iron shot for the ship's main guns to damage enemy hulls, smaller stone shot for the swivel guns to clear enemy decks. That's sophisticated tactical thinking. But here's what really demonstrates technological advancement: the breech-loading mechanism. Unlike muzzle-loading cannons that had to be pulled inboard, cleaned, loaded with powder and shot, then pushed back out after every shot, breech-loading guns used removable chambers pre-loaded with gunpowder. You could swap out the empty chamber, insert a fresh one, and fire again in seconds. In close-quarters naval combat, where ships were grappled together and crews fought across decks, that rate of fire was devastating. This wasn't experimental technology. The Gribshunden carried multiple swivel guns positioned around the ship. This was standard military doctrine for Danish-Norwegian naval forces in 1495. Beyond the weapons, the Gribshunden itself represents a masterpiece of late medieval shipbuilding. The ship's construction shows sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamics and structural engineering. The hull used clinker-built construction, overlapping planks fastened with iron rivets, which created a flexible, seaworthy vessel that could handle rough northern seas. But here's what makes the Gribshunden special. It represents a transitional design between earlier Viking-style ships and later galleons. The hull shape shows refinements that improved speed and maneuverability. The deck structure was designed specifically to accommodate heavy guns. Foley noted something remarkable about the preservation. We can see the tool marks from the shipwrights who built this vessel. We can identify which trees were used and how the timber was processed. That level of preservation is almost unheard of in maritime archaeology. Most shipwrecks this old are reduced to scattered timbers and ballast stones. The Gribshunden retained its structural integrity, deck fittings, and even organic materials like rope and wood that normally decay within decades. The excavation recovered the ship's figurehead, a carved wooden creature that gives the ship its name. Figureheads served both decorative and psychological purposes, intimidating enemies and projecting royal power. The fact that this 525-year-old wooden carving survived is extraordinary. They also found the ship's anchor system, rigging components, and navigational equipment. Each artifact provides insights into how medieval sailors operated these vessels. Remember, this was the king's flagship. It wasn't just carrying weapons and naval equipment, it was carrying the material culture of late medieval Scandinavian royalty. Archaeologists recovered ceramic vessels, glassware, and tableware from the king's personal cabin. These items show the luxury standards expected for royal travel in 1495. They found spices, almonds, and saffron, expensive imported goods that indicated the ship's provisions came from international trade networks stretching to the Mediterranean and beyond. But here's something that adds a human dimension to the wreck. They found personal possessions belonging to crew members, wooden chests containing clothing, tools, and personal items. These weren't just sailors, these were individuals with lives, possessions, and stories. The ship was also carrying diplomatic gifts King Hans intended to present during his negotiations in Sweden. The exact nature of these gifts is still being studied, but they represent the political and economic stakes of late medieval European diplomacy. One of the most intriguing finds, a wooden box containing medical supplies and instruments. This tells us the ship carried a surgeon or physician, standard practice for major warships, but rarely documented archaeologically. Foley summarized the discovery's importance. The Gribshunden is a time capsule. Everything aboard represents a single moment in 1495. The technology, the trade goods, the personal possessions, the weapons. It's like opening a window directly into the late medieval world. Here's why the Gribshunden matters beyond just being a well-preserved wreck. For decades, historians believed the transition from medieval to early modern naval warfare happened gradually throughout the 1500s.
The story went like this. Ships slowly adopted gunpowder weapons, tactics evolved over generations, and by the time of the Spanish Armada in 1588, naval warfare had finally been transformed. The Gribshunden proves that timeline is wrong. By 1495, almost a century before the Armada, Scandinavian naval forces were already deploying integrated firearms systems, using breech-loading technology, and designing ships specifically to accommodate heavy weapons. This wasn't experimental, it was standard military equipment on a flagship. If Denmark-Norway had this technology in 1495, other naval powers almost certainly did too. That means England, France, Spain, and Portugal were likely developing similar systems at the same time. The implications are significant. The entire age of exploration, Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, happened during a period when European ships already possessed advanced firearms. That military technology advantage played a crucial role in European expansion. But here's something else the Gribshunden reveals: the speed of technological diffusion in late medieval Europe. Gunpowder arrived in Europe from China in the 13th century. By 1495, just 200 years later, European engineers had developed specialized naval firearms with breech-loading mechanisms and rotating mounts. That's rapid innovation by pre-industrial standards. It shows that medieval societies were far more technologically dynamic than we often assume. The excavation is ongoing. Researchers from Lund University are still documenting artifacts, analyzing ship construction techniques, and publishing findings. Every season brings new discoveries. And the Gribshunden isn't unique, it's just the best preserved example. Hundreds of late medieval wrecks lie on seafloors around the world, most of them unexplored. Each one has the potential to reveal technologies, trade networks, and capabilities we didn't know existed. So here's what we know. In 1495, the Danish-Norwegian flagship Gribshunden carried breech-loading firearms, integrated weapons systems, and naval combat technology that historians didn't think existed for another century. The ship's construction demonstrates sophisticated shipbuilding techniques and engineering knowledge. Its cargo reveals international trade networks, diplomatic practices, and the material culture of late medieval royalty. The wreck is extraordinarily well preserved, called the best preserved late medieval ship in the world by the archaeologists excavating it. That preservation gives us unprecedented insight into how these vessels were built, operated, and armed. This discovery fundamentally changes our understanding of naval warfare's evolution. The transition to gunpowder-armed warships didn't happen slowly over centuries. It happened rapidly, with sophisticated weapon systems already standard equipment by 1495. Medieval engineers were integrating cutting-edge military technology, developing breech-loading mechanisms, and designing ships around firearms decades before historians believed this was possible. The Gribshunden sat on the seafloor for 525 years, waiting to prove that medieval naval technology was far more advanced than we ever imagined. And it's spectacular. What other technologies from the medieval period have we underestimated? Drop a comment with your thoughts.